Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Mr. Eliphas Levi. This is Transcendental Magic, its Doctrine and Ritual. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but people do find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material and the link for my book, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, we are going to dive in and continue our exploration of Transcendental Magic, its Doctrine and Ritual, with Chapter 19 and hopefully 20, The Stone of the Philosophers, Elagabalus, Vocatio Sol Orum. The ancients adored the sun under the figure of a black stone, which they named Elagabalus or Heliogabalus. If you were unaware, this stone, I got a wide variety of things I'm interested in. Metallurgy is one of them. Things that fall from the sky is another one. This was a meteorite that fell however long ago, and it was worshipped in the exact same way that they worship that rock in Mecca, right? They walk around it, they try to get up there to kiss it. It is venerated because it came from the sky, therefore it was a gift from the gods. What did this stone signify, and how came it to be the image of the most brilliant of luminaries? That is, right, that's talking about the sun, but it's important to note that the most notable thing that happened to Elagabalus was that it was taken by one of the Roman emperors. I forget which one, but they called him Elagabalus or Heliogabalus. They named the emperor that because he venerated this stone, and he took it and brought it to his capital, rode it around in a chariot, and did all kinds of worshipful things to it. And at the end of his 3 years, his guards killed him. That's just an important thing to note, right? He was very much tied into this stone. This particular stone right here, this one that they're talking about right here, this was what he worshipped. This was his point of worship. He was trying to set it above Jupiter and the Romans, and that's a big problem, right? He was not a good guy. He was not kind or considerate. He had very few redeeming qualities, and he was killed by his guards in favor of his nephew. The disciples of Hermes, before promising their adepts the elixir of long life or the powder of projection, counseled them to seek for the philosophical stone. That is a different thing than what is this stone, and why a stone? The great initiator of the Christians invites his believers to build on the stone or rock if they do not wish their structures to be demolished. He terms himself the cornerstone and says to the most faithful of his apostles, "Thou art Peter, Petrus, and upon this rock, Petram, I will build my church." It is important to note that the church was not built upon Peter. It was built upon Paul, who never met Jesus. This stone, says the masters in alchemy, is the true salt of the philosophers, which is the third ingredient in the composition of azoth. Now, we know already that azoth is the name of the great hermetic and true philosophical agent. That would be magic. Right? The philosopher's stone is your mind. It is you alchemizing the higher elements. It is you coming to the realization that the power lies within you. That becomes the philosopher's stone, the philosopher who thinks about things. The philosopher's stone, now it may be a particular part contained inside of there, right around the third eye part, right? The thing that you can flex to see things, and that is entirely possible. When we did several of these studies with dealing with alchemy in particular, it was noted that some of the changes which were being described probably could not happen without magnetic manipulation. That magnetic manipulation, in my estimation, is probably added by the philosopher's stone, which is willpower. You can manifest using the number 138 through your willpower. Right? That's what this is describing. Using the philosopher's stone to alchemize. Right? Whether that be outside or inside, it's the same stone that uses both. Furthermore, their salt is represented under the figure of a cubic stone, which should tell you something. right? That is the representation of humanity for a lot of people, right? There are 8 points. That would be 8 in the 138. As may be seen in the 12 keys of Basil Valentine, or in the allegories of Trevisan. Once more, what is this stone? Actually, it is the foundation of absolute philosophy. It is supreme and immovable reason. Didn't I just tell you that? Before even dreaming of the metallic work, we must be fixed forever upon the absolute principles of wisdom. We must possess that reason which is the touchstone of truth. Never will a man of prejudices become the king of nature and the master of transmutations. That is true. You want to know why? Because if you don't believe it's possible, it won't be possible. And if you are prejudiced against the idea that it can happen, then it can't happen. Right? Your preconceptions will absolutely keep you from advancement. There are people out there who believe that other people are lesser than them because of the level of melanin in their skin. That is something that will limit you, right? There are people who believe that gender makes a difference. That will limit you. That is a prejudice, a preconceived notion that you are holding, which will hold you back from the ability to do the things that you want to do. If you believe that melanin is the separator, you're not going to get far in life. If you believe that the genitals that you were born with are holding you back, you're not going to get far in life. And that is just simply a reality. The philosophical stone is, hence, before all things, necessary. But how is it to be found? Hermes informs us in his emerald table. And once again, we will point out that there is no evidence of an emerald table. It is referenced a lot, but it's not the kind of thing that's just going to disintegrate, right? And maybe it is hidden in the Vatican. Maybe it is hidden by the Smithsonian. Maybe it is hidden by any of the other clubs, right? That is a possibility. What we do know right now is that we do not have it, right? It is not publicly available. Nobody laid their eyes on it in modernity, as far as we know. It may be out there. It may not. We have to assume, because we have not seen it, that it is not, right? People have a tendency to exaggerate things. We have seen that greatly in this book. We have seen that through several of these studies that we have done. It is possible that there is an emerald tablet from Teote, but it is also entirely possible that that was made up. I lean more towards the made up, just because I like to rely upon evidence, things that are repeatable, traceable, trackable, and you can actually see it. If we find in the Vatican an emerald table that was carved, what would have to be 6,000 years ago now, then okay. But we don't have anything even remotely resembling that. And so take it with a grain of salt. We must separate the subtle from the fixed with great care and assiduous attention. Thus, we must separate our certitudes from our beliefs. If you can put your hands upon it, witness it, or it is repeatable, then it is a certitude. If it is a myth, a legend, you cannot put your hands upon it, or it is not repeatable, then it is going to be a belief. And sharply distinguishes the respective domains of science and faith, understanding thoroughly that we do not know things which we believe, and that we cease immediately to believe anything which we come to actually know. No. And this is one of those pedantic dissociations, right? Well, if I know this thing, then I can't have faith in it. Bullshit. You have faith every single time that you get in a car that you are going to reach your destination. That is faith, right? You have a reason to believe it. You have every expectation. But there are all kinds of things that can interrupt, right? It is not a fact that if you get in your car and you drive, you're going to reach your destination. You're taking that upon faith. You are taking it upon faith every time you go outside of your house. You're taking it upon faith for most of your actions. You are having faith that this thing will act in the way that you expect it to. That is faith. Faith is not necessarily the belief in things unseen or unknown. That's part of it, but it's not the entirety of it. You can have faith outside of the unknown. There is very little differentiation, in fact, between things that you know and things that you have faith in. Right? Unless you are relying entirely upon faith for things unseen, right? If you are taking it upon faith that there is this emerald tablet, then nothing's going to dissuade you of that. Nothing is going to change your mind of that. And it is not necessarily a bad thing, but you're taking that on faith. You're taking it on faith that somebody had to die for you on a cross so that you can be forgiven from sin, even though there is much contrary evidence to that particular belief. And so, again, there's not a whole lot there, right? This is one of those things that people who believe too entirely in the unseen like to be pedantic about. Well, you know that. It's not faith. Bullshit. I still have faith even though I know. I know that I've healed myself. I still have faith that God made it happen. Back to the text. Immediately to believe anything which we actually come to know, so that the essence of things of faith in is the unknown and the indefinite. And agree, and I disagree. While it is quite the reverse with the things of science. Science is slap-ass full of faith, right? If you don't believe that, you haven't investigated dark matter at all. You haven't looked at black holes at all. They completely made up numbers to make their math work. Just completely pulled it out of their ass. They're like, this math does not add up. There must be another factor. Let me make it up. And just assume that it's there. There is no reason to believe that there is dark matter. There is no reason to believe that there is a black hole anywhere in existence. It is all theoretical. It is all conjecture. We have not proven that. But go to any university in the United States, to the astronomy department, and see what they tell you. Go to the physics department and see what they tell you. They will absolutely ride in their faith that these things exist, even though they are people of science. It must, thence, be inferred that science rests on reason and experience, whilst the basis of faith is sentiment and reason. So you got reason in both of them, huh? And you can't have any experience and it still be faith, right? Reason and experience is science. Sentiment and reason is faith. Well, people are sentimental about black holes. Again, I hit that because, again, there is no reason to believe in black holes. In other words, the philosophical stone is the true certitude which human prudence assures to conscientious researches and modest doubt, whilst religious enthusiasm ascribes it exclusively to faith. Now, it belongs neither to reason without aspirations, nor to aspirations without reason. True certitude is the reciprocal acquiescence of the reason, which knows in the sentiment which believes, and of the sentiment which believes in the reason which knows. The permanent alliance of reason and faith will result not from their absolute distinction and separation, but from their mutual control and their fraternal concurrence. So just the dudes. Such is the significance of the two pillars of Solomon's porch, one named Yakin and the other Boaz, one black and the other white. We have talked many times about these two pillars because the Masons do not understand it, and so I have to explain it. The two pillars represent the two forces of nature, right? The creative magnetic forces of creation, the Holy Spirit kind of personified, right? As a concept at least. You have the black one, which is the female, negative, grounding, nurturing power, and you have the white, which is the masculine, penetrative, generative power. That is the two of them. One of them is vices, one of them is virtues. You can pick and choose which one you want it to be, right? But you are meant to walk between those, neither cleaving to the black or the white, but instead using both of them in equal measure in order to do manifestation. That is what those pillars represent. Most of the other interpretations are most likely not correct. They are distinct and separate. They are even contrary in appearance. But if blind force sought to join them by bringing them close to one another, the roof of the temple would collapse. Separately, their power is one. Joined, they are two powers, true, which destroy one another. Not true. Damn it! Right? It is two parts of the same power. It is, right? God is infinite, unknowable, but contains both the masculine and the feminine, both the creative and the generative, right? Or the nurturative and the generative. Like, it's both powers. the same deity. They both come from the exact same place. All of the vices come from God. All of the virtues come from God. The ability to walk between them comes from God, right? Separately, their power is one. That is true. It is the same power, and if you are manifesting and you're only using one half of that equation, that's why you're not getting the results that you desire. It is about balance, people. It is about balance. For precisely the same reason, the spiritual power is weakened whensoever it attempts to usurp the temporal, while the temporal power becomes the victim of its encroachments on the spiritual. Now, temporal is time, right? That's what temporal means. It is tempo, time, the placement of time. The spiritual power is weakened whenever it attempts to usurp the temporal. No. That's literally how manifestation works. That's how I have healed myself, right? I have sent my spiritual power into the future to bring to me the timeline in which I am healed, right? That is temporal power being wielded by the spiritual. They are not mutually exclusive or countermanding. Gregory VII ruined the papacy. The papacy absolutely needed to be ruined. I do not know who Gregory VII was, but if he ruined the papacy, I am thankful. The schismatic kings have lost and will lose the monarchy. Human equilibrium requires 2 feet. The world gravitate by means of 2 forces. That is entirely speculative. Generation needs 2 sexes. That is not speculative at all. Such is the meaning of the Arcanum of Solomon, represented by the 2 pillars of the temple, Yakin and Boaz. The sun and moon of the alchemist correspond to the same symbol and correspond in the perfection and stability of the philosophical stone. That is not true. The sun and the moon have their own symbols. One is a circle with a dot in it, and the other one is a crescent moon. It is that's now there may be alchemists who use the same, but overarching, it is not, right? For the most part, the alchemists used the 2 separate things because they had 2 separate meanings. The sun is the hieroglyphic sign of truth because it is the visible source of light, and the root stone is the symbol of stability. It was for this reason that the ancients took the stone, Elagabalus, as the actual type of the sun. It was because it was a meteorite that fell out of the sky. And for this also, that the medieval alchemists pointed to the philosophical stone as the first means of making philosophical gold. I do want to point out another thing. This is the only time that I have ever seen Elagabalus being referred to as the philosopher's stone. I have not seen that anywhere else. This is simply something that he is saying. Making philosophical gold, that is to say, of transforming the vital forces represented by these 6 metals into soul, that is, into truth and light. The first and indispensable operation of the great work, leading to the secondary adaptations and discovering by the analogies of nature the natural and grosser gold to the possessors of the spiritual and living gold, of the true salt, the true mercury, and the true sulfur of the philosophers. Now, we've talked about this before. Salt is the body, right? Sulfur is the spirit, and sulfur is the soul, and mercury is the spirit, right? The part that moves and makes things happen is the mercury. The salt is the physical incarnation, and the sulfur is you making the decisions. That is the philosopher's stone. To find the philosophical stone is, then, to have discovered the absolute, as the masters otherwise say. Now, the absolute is that which admits of no errors. It is the fixation of the volatile. It is the rule of the imagination. It is the very necessity of being. It is the immutable law of reason and truth. The absolute is that which is. Now, that which is, in some sense, precedes he who is. God himself cannot be in the absence of a reason of being, and can only exist in virtue of a supreme and inevitable reason. This is an anthropomorphization, right? We do not know why God exists. That is something that we assume. We do not know why creation exists. That is something that we assume. We do not know that God cannot be in the absence of a reason of being. We don't know that. That is an assumption that you are making, anthropomorphization, and can only exist in virtue of a supreme and inevitable reason is an assumption. It may be true. It is probably true. That does not make it true. It is this reason which is the absolute. It is this in which we must believe if we desire a rational and solid foundation for our faith. No, it may be said in these days that God is merely a hypothesis, but the absolute reason is not a hypothesis. It is essential to being. St. Thomas once said, "A thing is not just because God wills it, but God wills it because it is just." Really? Okay, so in that case, unjust things don't happen because God does not will them to happen, right? God is not micromanaging your life. God has assigned you your life. He has told you, hey, go out here and learn these lessons. It's up to you to learn them or not, right? God is not micromanaging your decisions. He's not sitting there saying, oh, no, right? That's an assumption that I make. Take that with a grain of salt. But no, right? God wills it because it is just, and so therefore unjust actions can't happen, unless you're accounting for this other entity who is co-equal to God who brings about unjust. Had St. Thomas logically deduced all the consequences of this beautiful thought, he would have found the philosophical stone, and besides being the angel of the school, he would have been its reformer. To believe in the reason of God and in the God of reason is to render atheism impossible. When Voltaire said, "If God did not exist, it would be necessary to invent him," he felt, rather than understood, the reason which is in God. Does God really exist? There is no knowing, but we desire it to be so, and hence we believe it, right? I fully, firmly believe it for myself. I tell you all of the time, take it as speculative, right? I believe it because of the personal experience that I have had, which was outside of myself, something that I could not bring about for myself. And so I believe, but you don't have to. It is speculative. You can believe any of the other religions. You can hopefully take it upon yourself to investigate them before you fully invest yourself, but take it with a grain of salt. I believe that God exists. I believe that all of creation is here for a purpose. All of it, every single part. All of it happens for a reason. I fully and with my whole chest say that, and still maintain that it's speculation for everybody else. Faith, thus formulated, is reasonable faith, for it admits the doubt of science, and, as a fact, we believe only in things which seem to us probable, though we do not know them. To think otherwise is delirium. To speak otherwise is to talk like the illuminated or fanatical. Now, it is not to such persons that the philosophical stone is promised. The ignoramuses who have turned primitive Christianity from its path by substituting faith for science, dream for experience, the fantastic for the real, inquisitors who, during so many ages, have waged a war of extermination against magic, have succeeded in enveloping with darkness the ancient discoveries of the human mind, so that we are now groping for the key to the phenomena of nature. Now, all natural phenomena depend upon a single and immutable law, represented by the philosophical stone, and especially by its cubic form. It is also important to note that the stone in discussion here is not a cube. It is a cone. This law, expressed by the tetrad in the Kabbalah, furnished the Hebrews with all of the mysteries of their divine tetragram. It may be said, therefore, that the philosophical stone is square in every sense, like the heavenly Jerusalem of St. John, that one of its sides is inscribed with the name, and the other with that of God. I don't know this, right? This is not Yahweh. I don't know what this symbol is. That one of its facets bears the name of Adam, a second that of Heva, and the two others that of Azat and Inri. At the beginning of the French translation of a book by the Sieur de Nuisement on the philosophical salt, the spirit of the earth is represented standing on a cube, over which tongues of flame are passing. The phallus is replaced by a caduceus, the sun and moon figure on the right and left breast. He is bearded, crowned, and holds a scepter in his hand. This is the Azoth of the sages on his pedestal of salt and sulfur. The symbolic head of the goat of Mendes is occasionally given to this figure, and it is then the Baphomet of the Templars and the Word of the Gnostics. Do we need to get into the Word again? If you are brand new here, I have a video called The Divine and the Trinity Explained. I believe that's the name of it. I'll link it. And we discuss in quite extensive detail how the Word cannot be personified at all. Bizarre images which become the scarecrows for the vulgar after affording food for thought to the sages. Innocent hieroglyphs of thought and faith which have been a pretext for the rage of persecutions. How pitiable are men in their ignorance, but how they would despise themselves if once they came to know. And that's going to end chapter 19. We're going to go right into chapter 20 because it is intrinsically linked, right? The Philosopher's Stone and the universal medicine cannot be separated. Chapter 20, the universal medicine, caput resurrectio circulus. The majority of our physical complaints come from our moral diseases, according to the one and universal dogma, and by reason of the law of analogies. All right, so right off the top, there are many things that we call upon ourselves, right? We have an epidemic right now in this country with mental illness. And what do you mean, Ped? Everybody wants to identify as a victim. Everybody wants to be able to cast upon these letters the reason why they can't concentrate or why they can't do the thing which they should be doing. Right? Everybody wants to have ADD or OCD or AUHDD or whatever the hell they're coming up with these days. Everybody is taking upon themselves all of these titles, self-designating themselves as sick. And so, some of your physical complaints do indeed come from moral diseases. Your inability to focus is not because you have this disease, it is because you lack discipline. And that is from someone who has an extreme problem focusing. Right? I don't have ADD. I have sit your ass down and do what you need to do. Right? That's what we as a group need to do. But that's the Philosopher's Stone in action. That is realizing that it is an internal problem that I have. But it's not this disease. It is something that I have to overcome. But we're slap-ass ate up with this, right? People don't want to exercise, so they go get lizard venom to inject in themselves so that it will dissolve the fat. That is a real thing. People are really doing that. Ozempic. What? Right? It's literally made from the venom of a monster, and it kills not just the fat, it kills the proteins. If you don't know what proteins are, that's the muscles. Right? It kills the viscous liquids in your eyes. It literally eats your eyes. You lose your sight over time by taking this medicine, but it's much easier than walking down the road 30 minutes a day. It's much easier than getting up off of your ass and walking down the road. Just inject this venom into you and it's going to be perfectly fine. Right? And so, some of your physical complaints do absolutely come from your moral diseases. But not all of them, right? Your cancer is probably not caused because you say cuss words, right? It could be because you smoke cigarettes. There is some correlation there. But it's not because you eat red meat. It's not because you eat eggs, right? But it's also not because you stay angry. There are other repercussions for staying angry. It's probably not cancer. Can't say for certainty that it's never going to be that. It's entirely possible. You do create your reality. But this is a bigger statement than it should be, right? The majority of our physical complaints come from our moral diseases. Yes and no. A great passion to which we abandon ourselves always corresponds to a great malady in store for us. No, right? Always, big word. A great passion to which we abandon ourselves always corresponds to a great malady in store for us. There will always be a malady coming. There will always be something that you don't want happening in your life. And sometimes it does come right after a great passion, especially especially if you're on the right path, right? If you are making a decision to quit smoking, for instance, right? Things are going to come into your life once you make that decision to try to reverse that decision. You will absolutely have a stressful day right afterwards, and probably a stressful week, maybe even a stressful month. It will happen. It's one of those things to test your resolve. Do you actually want this thing? And so a great passion can absolutely correspond to a great malady, but it's not a one-to-one correlation. If you are attempting to make your life better, challenges will come. But this... mortal sins are so named because they physically and positively cause death. Alexander the Great died of pride. I thought it was an infection. I'm pretty, didn't he go and take Babylon and then die immediately after from an infection that he caught from the area? Isn't that how he died? Did he die of pride? Has anybody ever died of pride? Right? Well, I guess so. The emperor we were just talking about, who was named after the stone, right? Or the stone, he named himself after the stone. He was prideful. He died from his pride. So, yeah, I guess. But Alexander the Great wasn't killed by other people because he was attempting to conquer the world. He just ran into a mosquito. They gave him a disease. Or a bacteria. They gave him a disease. Or a virus. They gave him a disease. Right? That's how he died. It wasn't pride. He was naturally temperate. And it was through pride that he yielded to the excess which occasioned his death. Francis I died of an adultery. I'm not familiar with the story, but unless he got caught in the act, I doubt very seriously it was adultery that did it, or a disease that he contracted because of it. Louis XV died of his deer park. And again, I'm not familiar with the story, but I doubt very seriously it was having the deer park that killed him. When Marat was assassinated, he was perishing of rage and envy. He was a monomaniac of pride who believed himself to be the only just man and would have slain everything that was not Marat. Again, I don't know, but if he had lost his mind, it can be absolutely, right? Now, rage and envy being linked to pride is a little bit wild, right? Rage is wrath. Envy is greed, probably. And linking that to pride, which is a whole separate vice than the other two, is a little bit weird, but okay. Several of our contemporaries died of deceived ambition after the Revolution of February. I'm not sure which revolution this would be. It's in the 1800s. Deceived ambition, so they believe the wrong thing. Now, if you're fighting on the wrong side of a revolution, the losing side, right? Not ideologically, but the side that loses, then you're going to die from it. But that's not necessarily pride or ambition. You're just fighting on the wrong side. So soon as any will is irrevocably confirmed in a tendency towards the absurd, the man is dead, and the rock on which he will break is not distant. It is therefore true to say that wisdom preserves and prolongs life. That is true, but it is not necessarily related to anything that we have just read. The great master told us, "My flesh is meat indeed, and my blood is drink indeed." Do I need to? Check out the Bible study. "He that eateth my flesh and drinketh my blood hath everlasting life." And when the crowd murmured, he added, "Here the flesh profiteth nothing. The words that I speak unto you are spirit and life." So also, when he was about to die, he attached the remembrance of his life to the sign of bread, and that of his spirit to the symbol of wine, thus instituting the communion of faith, hope, and charity. I hold a different view on that, right? Judaism is a worship of a blood-drinking deity. It is a deity that requires great blood sacrifice before every great act throughout the entirety of the Old Testament. Before the Israelites could conquer the Promised Land, They had to cut off a piece of themselves and pile it into a pile for this God to receive the favor to be able to break down the walls of Jericho where the people were living in peace, right? Not even getting into the genocides, which that God drank deeply from, right? But then again, with David, he cut off the same piece of the people and made another pile, a bigger pile, and that's how he got to be a king. We see this consecration of the temple, the enormous amount of blood that deity absorbed, right? We see repeatedly throughout Judaism the worship of blood, the worship of this deity who likes blood, who requires blood for every act. And then we get to the New Testament, which is contradictory, right? Jesus comes and he's like, look to my Father, do no wrong, be nice to all of the people, right? Feed the poor, watch out for the homeless, take care of the widows, go out and do charitable works, heal the people, teach them about God, turn them back to the Father at every chance he's got. And then, contrary to that message, there is I am the everlasting life. Without me, you receive no salvation. Those two things are separate. They are not the same message. They are two separate messages being relayed. I am of the belief that Jesus was telling us the first message, and that part of his mission was to do away with the blood sacrifice. And then we got the second half of the message. And the second half of the message is this blood sacrifice is the most important thing that has ever happened on the face of the earth. And if you don't acknowledge that this man died for you and accept his blood and eat his flesh and drink his blood, then you are condemned to burn forever in hell. Right? Which, by the way, is not a biblical or an Old Testament concept. It was entirely created in the era of the New Testament. And so I believe that Jesus was trying to do away with the blood cult. And then we created a whole brand new blood cult centered around him, which probably pissed him off just a little bit. Right? Now, that's speculative. You won't find that in the Bible, but you will find it there if you read it. Back to the text. Now, it is in the same sense that the Hermetic Masters have said, make gold potable, and you will have the universal medicine. Potable means that you can eat it or drink it. That is to say, appropriate truth to your needs. Let it become the source at which you daily drink, and you will, in yourself, have the immortality of the sages. That makes a lot more sense than trying to drink gold, right? As an allegory, it works. As a literal thing, not as much. You can drink gold. People do it. You ever heard of Goldschlager? Other people do it all of the time too, right? There are soluble metals is what they call them. There's a variety of them, and you can get them as a supplement. Part of them is gold. Whether it actually does you any good or not is entirely up for debate. But if you're using mental gold, then yeah, this is exactly what you need to do. You need to every single day transmute the gold. Every single day you need to decide, hey, I'm going to follow the higher path. Hey, I'm going to do the correct thing. Hey, I'm going to be the example. Every single day you need to be making the gold potable. Absolutely. So as an allegory, it works perfectly fine. Temperance, tranquility of soul, simplicity of character, calmness and rationality of will. These things not only make a man happy, but strong and well-seeming. I want to point out, temperance is not exclusion. Temperance is balance. It is walking between the two pillars. It is embracing both the virtues and the vices with equality. Neither cleaving to the I'm never going to drink or cleaving to the I'm always going to drink. But instead being like, I can drink every once in a while. That is temperance. Right? It is not either of the two extremes, but the balance between. So, yes. Right? And that is temperance between all of the vices. So wrath and love, temperated. Lust and chastity, temperated. Right? So temperance, yes. That leads implicitly into tranquility of the soul. Now, simplicity of character is a little bit harder. Right? That is, not being excessive in the accumulation is simplicity. Not being overly pontificate, that is simplicity. So there's a lot that goes into simplicity of character. Part of that is going to be alchemizing. Part of that is going to be not finding the balance. right? Calmness and rationality of will, yes, I absolutely agree, right? That does not mean that there are not times to react with less than calmness or rationality, but for the most part, you should. I mean, you should be taking time to make sure that the actions you are taking are aligned with what you want to be. So yes, it does make a man happy, strong, and well-seeming. By growth in reason and goodness, man becomes immortal. There we go again. No, right? You are not immortal. Your soul is. Your body is not, never will be. There is no substance that is ever going to make it that way. Seeking that substance is folly, right? The mental alchemy, absolutely. Trying to find the elixir of life externally, stupid. That is not to say that we cannot extend our life, right? We do that now. The average life expectancy in the last 100 years has grown exponentially because of modern pharmaceuticals, where we are endeavoring to increase our life through alchemy, right? Alchemy is the predecessor to chemistry, which led to the pharmaceuticals. And we have derivatives that we use to extend our life. But it won't ever reach immortality. That is simply never going to happen. You will die. Back to the text. We are the authors of our own destiny, and God does not save us apart from our own concurrence. That is true. There is no death for the sage. There is no death for anyone in this sense, right? Once again, the soul is eternal. It came from somewheres. It will return to somewheres. That is the exact same place. Heaven and hell, neither one of those two things are in the Old Testament. You did not go to hell or heaven in the Old Testament for anything. Everybody went to the land of the dead. That's still the same. That is recreating with Source, or reconnecting with Source. So it is not just the sage. Now, the sage is aware of that. Most other people are not, right? They think that their eternality is conditional upon taking certain actions, right? Somebody had to hang on this piece of wood in order for you to be able to go to heaven. It doesn't matter that you repented. It doesn't matter that you completely changed your life and have never heard the name. You're still condemned to hell, right? God is not able to forgive you unless you accept this blood and just cover yourself in it. If you don't do that, God is incapable of forgiving you. Doesn't it just sound ridiculous? Like, the more I say it, the more ridiculous it sounds. The creator of all creation, he who holds every single element in the entirety of the universe in its exact position, who keeps all of the nuclei rotating in the correct position, that guy, he's restricted from forgiving you because you asked for it. You have to kill a goat or a chicken or a person. If you don't do that, you can't be forgiven. You have to cover yourself in blood. Don't you know that? I mean, come on. If nobody dies, does it even mean anything? Death is a phantom, made horrible by the weakness and ignorance of the vulgar. Yes, that is what I just said right there. That right there is exactly what I just said. Change is the sign of motion, and motion reveals life. If the corpse itself were dead, its decomposition would be impossible. What? If the corpse itself were dead, its decomposition would be impossible? The corpse is the meat suit, buddy. Like, not the soul, the meat suit. Change is the sign of motion, and motion reveals life. If the corpse itself was dead, its decomposition would be impossible. All of its composing molecules are living and working for their liberation. And you may dream that the spirit is set free, the first, so that it may cease to live. You believe that thought and love can die when the grossest matter is imperishable? If change ought to be called death, we die and are reborn daily, because our forms change daily. Fear, therefore, to soil or tear our garments, but do not fear to lay them by when the hour of sleep approaches. Yes, right? This means to soil or tear our garments, right, the body, is to do things which are not in accordance with your higher calling, right? If you are an alcoholic, drinking all of the time, you're soiling or tearing your garments. If you're acting outside of what you know to be correct, you are soiling or tearing your garments. And so, yes, absolutely fear that. And do not fear to lay them by when the hour of sleep approaches, because the soul is indeed eternal, and it is not destined to punishment any more than this life is a punishment. It's not. It's an experience, not a punishment. The embalming and preservation of bodies is a superstition, which is against nature, and I do agree with that, right? It is a fear. That is what led to the preservation, was thinking that this temple was meant to be here forever. It's not. The best thing you can do is to return it exactly how you found it. Just stick it in a hole. Now, we don't do that for sanitary reasons, partly, but for the most part, it's the superstition created around it, right? There are people right now who will be like, you can't be cremated, your soul will be condemned to hell. How stupid is that? Like nobody has ever died in a fire, right? Like nobody has ever been involved in an explosion which incinerated them. And if they were, now they're condemned to hell. They didn't get a proper burial. They're condemned to hell. It doesn't matter what their life was like. It doesn't matter if they accepted the Savior. It doesn't matter if they lived virtuously. It doesn't matter. Their body burnt. They are condemned to hell. That's just the way it works. It is an attempt to create death. It is the forcible petrification of a substance which is needed by life. But, on the other hand, we must not be quick to destroy or make away with bodies. There is no abruptness in the operations of nature, and we must not risk the violent rupture of the bonds of a departing soul. Death is never instantaneous. That is not true. Talk to the people in Hiroshima. They died pretty fucking quick. It is, like sleep, gradual. So long as the body has not become absolutely cold, so long as the nerves can quiver, a man is not wholly dead. And if none of the vital organs are destroyed, the soul can be recalled either by accident or by a strong will. I am going to put out the caution the same way that I always do. Don't do this, right? I understand the temptation. I understand why you would want to. Even if you are an adept, if you know how to do these things, don't. There is no reason to call back from the dead anything that is past. You might get what you were asking for. You might get that person back. You might get another person back in that same body. You might get a not person in that body. You can do all kinds of things. That doesn't mean you should, right? You can create a bomb and hurt people. Don't do it. You can take a gun and hurt people. Don't do it. You can call somebody back from the dead and hurt people. Don't do it, right? There may be exceptions to that rule. I hope to never run across one. I hope that it is never intrinsic upon me to attempt to call anybody back to life, because I am going to fail. I am not going to attempt it. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to listen to me. You don't have to take my advice on this, but I hope you do. I tell you, don't heal somebody unless they consent. Can there be consent from someone dead? Do you know whether this was their time to go or not? Are you God to be playing with the dead? Don't do it. Now, people do it all of the time. What are you talking about, dead? Clear. Right? That's playing with the dead. That is doing things. And sometimes we're thankful for those things. Most of the time they work out perfectly fine, but there have been instances where it is not so. Be exceedingly careful. There's a reason why I did not go to be a paramedic or a doctor, and it's not because I'm dumb. Well, it might be a little bit because I'm dumb. A philosopher has declared that he would discredit universal testimony rather than believe in the resurrection of a dead person. Like, we do resurrect dead people all the time, right? That clear all of the time. CPR, like, we have a variety of ways to resurrect the dead, and so take it with what you want. I'm not going to participate in magically doing it for damn sure. The resurrection of a dead person, but his speech was rash, for it is on the faith of universal testimony that he believed in the impossibility of resurrection. Supposing such an occurrence were proved, what would follow? Must we deny evidence or renounce reason? It would be absurd to say so. We should simply infer that we were wrong in supposing resurrection to be impossible. Abactu ad posse vale consecutu. Let us now make bold to affirm that resurrection is possible and occurs oftener than might be thought. Many persons whose deaths have been legally and scientifically attested have been subsequently found in their coffins, dead indeed, but having evidently come to life and having bitten through their clenched hands so as to open the arteries and escape from their horrible agonies. This is a real thing. Do you know why we have wakes? Right? You've probably been to a wake. You probably don't know why. Because in modernity, it is much less likely that it would happen, right? We have all kinds of diagnostic tests to actually affirm that someone is dead before we we pronounce them dead. But in these days, in the 1800s, that was not so. There are several maladies that can afflict you which imitate death, right? Your breathing can get so slow as to be imperceptible. Your heartbeat so slow as to be imperceptible, and people think you are dead. And so they used to bury them right away, and people would find out through various means that they were not dead. And so we developed a practice called the wake. And that is, we sit around a dead body in case it wakes up. That's why it's called a wake, in case it wakes up, so that somebody is there to witness it. Now, these days, it's not taken as seriously as it was in those days. Right? In the days of the 1800s, somebody was in the room the entire time there was a wake. Nowadays, we have visiting hours at the funeral home for a wake. But back in these days, it was 3 to 5 days. They would sit around with this dead body, somebody always observing it, just in case it came back to life. It was such a problem that they started burying people with bells outside of the grave with a string that went into the coffin, so that if you woke up dead, you could pull the string and someone would hear the bell and come and rescue you. It was a thing. It really was. And so this makes sense in light of that. Right? A doctor would tell us that such persons were in a lethargy and not dead. And that is, for the most part, exactly what it is. But what is lethargy? It is the name which we give to an uncompleted death, a death which is falsified by return to life. It is easy by words to escape from a difficulty when it is impossible to explain facts. What? It is easy by words to escape from a difficulty when it is impossible to explain facts. That doesn't make sense. I mean, you can make something up, is what you're saying, right? Like, it is impossible to explain facts means that you do not have facts. If it is impossible to explain, you do not have the understanding of it. I firmly hold that if you have the true understanding of a concept, you can explain it to a elementary school child. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to be perfectly explained, but the concept can be explained. We can explain planetary motion to a child. Right? We can explain all kinds of things simplistically, even complicated things. We can explain simplistically. So if you find it impossible to explain facts, then you probably don't have facts. You probably don't understand the concept which you are trying to relay. And so you have to escape by words. But these words are not facts, right? You are using words to escape from a difficulty because you don't have the facts. The soul is joined to the body by the means of sensibility, and when sensibility ceases, it is a sure sign that the soul is departing. That is an assumption, right? Which sensibility, right? The ability to sense is what I'm talking about, not the ability to cognate, which would be sensibility, right? When sensibility ceases, it is a sure sign that the soul is departing. So we don't have people in a coma, right? We don't have people that live in a catatonic state. We don't have people, like, using the reasoning sensibility. We don't have people that have severe developmental problems, right? They aren't able to be sensible. That's not a thing. They don't exist. Outside of that, we don't have people that can't see, right? They don't have this sense. We don't have people that can't hear. They don't have that sense. We have people that can't feel, right? They don't have sense. So either way you look at it, either the mental sensibility, the ability to reason, or the ability to sense things through physical contact, neither one of those works for this. Neither one of them. The magnetic sleep is a lethargy, or factious death, which is curable at will. That would be meditation, right? That would be the only one. The etherization, or torpor, produced by chloroform is a real lethargy, which sometimes ends in absolute death, when the soul, ravished by its temporary liberation, makes an effort of will to become free altogether, which is possible for those who have conquered hell. Okay, so this was the brand new anesthesia, right? This was just after the Civil War. During the Civil War, they discovered chloroform and its effects. And yes, you can kill people with chloroform, right? It puts you into a sleep, well, to the point where you can have surgery cut up, like people can cut parts off of you and you don't wake up, right? So that is a little death. But you can overuse chloroform and lead to an actual death, right? That is to say, whose moral strength is superior to that of astral attraction. And the point being is that at this time they didn't understand overdose. Hence, resurrection is possible only for elementary souls, and it is these above all who run the risk of involuntary revival in the tomb. Great men and true sages are never buried alive. The theory and practice of resurrection will be given in our ritual. To those, meanwhile, who may ask me whether I have raised the dead, I would say that if I replied in the affirmative, they would not believe me. So, you would rather imply that you have so that you don't have to answer the question. That's what you just did, right? If I ever ask the dead, you can answer yes or no. That is a yes or no, right? But this is an implication that yes, I have, without stating it so that you can be disproven. That's a coward's out, right? If you're going to state something, state it. Put your fucking stamp on it. I do that all of the time. Even when I maintain the speculative, it's still got my stamp on it. It now remains for us to examine whether the abolition of pain is possible and whether it is wholesome to employ chloroform or magnetism for surgical operations. Yes, it is absolutely wholesome to use anesthesia. There is nothing wrong with it. Now, the problem again was with dosage. They did not understand overdose at all, right? They were still casually using heroin in these days. So we think, and science will acknowledge it later on, that by diminishing sensibility, we diminish life, and that we subtract from pain under such circumstances turns to the profit of death. I'm going to stop, right? Because I just happen to have this recent experience. Right? If you were unaware, my leg is broken, right? It is almost healed. I am almost to the point where I can walk, and it is well ahead of schedule. But I learned something during the process, right? I had to have surgery. I broke my tibular plateau. They had to go in, put in a plate, reconstruct it. It was a whole thing. And one of the things that I learned through this process was painkillers separate you from the ability to use the natural forces, right? I've healed myself using the magnetic forces of creation, which is the Holy Spirit. Now, I asked for healing. God showed me how to heal myself through the manipulation of these things. When you are under pain medicine, you can't, right? And this is something that I've been practicing this for a long time, right? The dissipation of pain. It's one of the things that I can do, right? I learned how to do that because I've got a lot wrong, right? Besides my broken leg, I've had a lot happen to me over the years, if you're unaware, right? I had a car wreck, 13 discs are messed up, 7 herniations, or 7 bulges, 6 herniations, 3 spinal impingements. I've healed myself from that for the most part, right? I haven't had an MRI. I can't tell you factually that it is healed, but my daily pain on my back is pretty non-existent these days. But that has not always been the case. I woke up at a 7 or an 8 for 15 years solid. And one of the things that I learned how to do was dissipate that pain through the meditative practices. When you're on painkillers, you can't, or I couldn't pull any energy, move it anywheres. I couldn't dissipate the pain at all. I was completely separated from the ability to touch the source. That's a thing, right? And that is in part what he is talking about right here. What we subtract from pain under the circumstances turns to the profit of death, whether we should do these things or not. Excruciating pain is a thing. If it is a temporary pain, by all means, take your medications. I'm not a big fan of the medicines, right? We've talked about that many times, and part of that is the overdosing aspect. Part of that is the tolerance levels that grow over time. Like, there's a whole lot of detractors from taking pain medicine on a regular basis. If you can get away from taking them, it is the best thing you can do for yourself. And not just because then you can actually work on healing yourself. Now, I have used a natural herb for a long time for healing purposes. I'm getting to the point where I really don't need that anymore. And so I'm having to psychologically battle that problem that I have dealt with for a while. You can, through magical means, dissipate pain. You can, through magical means, heal yourself. Both of those things I say because I have done it, but it is not, as far as I know, been reproduced. And so take it as speculation. But I hold it as fact for myself because I have done it. And one of the things that I noticed was that if you take pain medicine, it does separate you from the powers, right? All of it. Like, you really can't even feel it. And that is definitely something to bear in mind if you are using opioids on a daily basis, because it is probably separating you from something, maybe even intentionally. Back to the text. Pain bears witness to the struggle for life, and hence we observe that the dressing of the wound is excessively painful in the case of persons who are operated on under anesthetics. Now, again, this was the brand new time of, and the dressing of a wound was exceptionally painful, but not the cutting off of the leg. There will be pain on the other side of whatever procedure you have done under anesthesia. Like, that is pretty much a necessity. If it is necessary for you to have anesthesia, then the procedure is going to be significant enough that there will be pain associated with it, right? And even if it is something as simple as a laparoscopic surgery, where they just go in and stick something in there and look, right? It is still going to be painful. Now, if chloroform were resorted to at each dressing, one of two things would happen. Either the patient would die, or the pain would return and continue between the dressings. Nature is not violated with impunity. And again, we have developed different drugs for that besides chloroform. And that is going to bring us to the end of these two chapters. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a series of somewhat difficult topics. I understand I hold some unconventional beliefs, and I have a tendency to step on toes because of those. When I relay those, it is not intentional, but it is not something I apologize for. I have effected change in myself through the use of the electromagnetic forces of creation, which is the Holy Spirit. I asked God to heal me. He showed me how to heal myself and kind of told me that I had to show you too. It's there. These playlists contain it. The book contains it. All of these things, some of them I've given out freely. Some of them are behind a paywall. The ones that are behind the paywall is where I consolidated, right? It is very much easier to deal with in the book or in the members list than it is to try and dig it out of the Esoterica playlist with its 300 videos. And so I am here to describe as honestly, openly, and clearly as possible that you can do these things and the procedures by which you can do these things. I have healed myself. I don't talk about these things idly, right? I healed my throat. Like, that is a wonderful thing. The fact that I can talk for this long is a blessing that was impossible a year ago. A single year ago. And so it is easy for me, right? I've healed my throat. I've healed my shoulder. This one right here I had surgery on 20 years ago. My back, I'm pretty sure it's good, right? I don't have that pain. My leg, it's doing wonderful, right? A broken leg is a thing. It was not any of the healing. None of it was instantaneous. None of it was without pain. All of it took effort upon my part. Right? Even if it was just the concentration of the energies like I'm doing with my leg. I've learned a lot. These things are possible, but they're not described well, right? The Philosopher's Stone is probably not a physical object, right? It is almost certainly your mind alchemized to the proper way. That is almost certainly what the Philosopher's Stone is. Even bearing in mind when they're talking about alchemy with physical substances, I do believe that you can affect outside of yourself through sheer force of will. I have done it. And so, to me, the intrinsic part that is missing from the alchemy when they talk about the Philosopher's Stone is the use of willpower to change the substance. Now, by what means that is affected, I have not done. I do not have the experimental part of that done yet. I do plan on getting into it, right? I'm going to be reading tarot here in just a couple of days up to a couple of weeks, depending on when I can get the new studio set up. But that's coming, and we are going to be exploring alchemy because I am interested. I do want to see these things and see if possibly we can affect through sheer force of will. That is something that I want to try. It may not work. That is fine. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow, throw me a comment. If you agree or disagree with anything that was said, put it in the box down below, and if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work you would like to see me discuss in the manner that we are doing here, drop that in the box as well. And if you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks. Consider joining for a membership or picking up a copy of my book. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pit State. Peace.